Hi, in this video we're going to be talking about using PowerShell to analyze the logs in the Windows Event Viewer. So if you're into doing things via the command line or you just want to get better at PowerShell, this is a great way to learn. Alright, so as you probably know, the Event Viewer is used to log specific events such as crashes, errors, driver issues, and just informational events as well. So let's open it up real quick and take a look. So I could type in Event Viewer. Alright, so it's reading the logs right now. Okay, so up here we have our logs. You could have some custom views if you want. So these are the ones people use most often, the Windows logs, usually the application and system, sometimes security if you're looking for issues with login events. Then we have some other logs here for hardware events and so on that you could check out. Then of course you could come here and sort them as well by the type. Right here we have the error on top, and then once you find the one you're looking for, many people just look at the event ID and research that to try and figure it out, because if you could see here, a lot of this information is not going to be super helpful. And then of course you could filter your log, perform searches, and all that other good stuff. Okay, so now let's take a look at the commands we're going to play with here today. All right, so I have some examples here of the commands we're going to run. So let's open up PowerShell. So for these, you don't have to run it as administrator unless you're looking for stuff in the security log. You might have to, so keep that in mind. All right, so for the first example, we're going to view recent system events. So this will display the 5 most recent events in the log, which could be useful for checking what Windows has recorded recently, such as service starts, hardware messages, or driver events. You can see we have newest here. And one thing to keep in mind when using newest is that these log files are constantly being updated and more being added. So if you run it a couple minutes later, you're probably going to have different results. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the system log for the newest 5 events. We'll copy that, paste it in. All right, so we have our time, the entry type, the source, and the message. And then if you watched our last video on PowerShell commands, you probably remember that you could actually tweak the command and get detailed information instead of just this generic message here. But if you're doing, more than 5, or you're doing the first 100 or 200, it's going to be a long list of information. So keep that in mind. All right, let's clear the screen and move on. All right, so now we're going to show recent system errors. So this will list the 5 most recent error events from the system log. So these are not critical or informational warning, they're error events. So it'll display only the time, source, ID, and message fields. So ideal for troubleshooting crashes, failed services, or hardware issues. So once again, you can see we have newest 5 here. And if you see some of these backticks here on my commands, that is because they were in multiple lines here. And then if you paste it into PowerShell, it gets confused and may throw you an error. All right, so we're going to copy this, paste it in. See how it thinks there's multiple lines anyways, even though I have the backticks here, so we'll paste anyways. And now you can see we have an error. And that is because the command was incorrect here, so I have the right version here, and I was missing this pipe here between newest 5 and select object, which should be right here. All right, so now I'm going to copy this command. Let's get out of this error here. Still thinks it's multiple lines, which it is. But you can see this time it worked. All right, so we have our time generated, our source, event ID, and the message. So these are the 5 newest error entries for the system log. All right, let's clear it out and move on. All right, so now we're going to find startup and shutdown times. So this will filter the system log for these 2 events, 6005 and 6, which represent system startup and shutdown times, which is useful for tracking when the computer was last booted or powered off. All right, so here's our command. Still thinks it's multiple lines, which it is. All right, so here is the date and time. So the event log service was started and then was stopped at this time. And this happens when the computer is started and shut down. So you can see it was started on 10:30 at 11:34, stopped on 10:30 at 11:34. You can see that was a reboot because the time is really close together. So shut down at 7 seconds and then restart at 29 seconds. All right, so let's move on. So for our next example here, we're going to be searching logs for a specific keyword. So for this example, we're going to search the application log for events containing the word network. And of course, you could replace the word network with printer error update or other words to find related events. So you can see we have the word network here. We're going to get the first 5 results from the application log. All right, so let's copy this. Paste anyways. All right, so here's another example of an error I wanted to show you. So it wants the property. And if we go back here, that is because I had an extra line break after the comma here. So another example of how careful you need to be when running these commands. All right, so let's get out of here, clear the screen. Now I have it copied with the correct syntax here, paste it in. Now you can see it works. All right, so you can see here we're in the application log looking for the first 5 entries with the word network. And you can see here this runs off the screen, so it probably has the word network in here somewhere. It's just not showing it. And you can see restored network, saved network, and so on. And then, like I said before, you could use different words besides network, add more than just the first 5, and then we could change it and customize it to get the output you're looking for. All right, let's clear the screen and move on. All right, so now we're going to count the number of events in a log. All right, so this will display the total number of entries in the system log in our case. This helps you see how much data the log holds, which is useful before filtering or exporting. And of course, you could replace system with application or security, for example. And then, like I said, security, you're going to need admin rights. All right, so get event log, log name system, and then count. Okay, let's see what we got here. Sometimes this takes a few seconds to actually do the count. All right, so 14,864 entries currently in the system log. So if you're going to be, exporting all of them, keep that in mind that that's a big number there and you might run into some problems. All right, let's clear the screen here. All right, so for our last one, we're going to find the most common event sources. So we're going to analyze the 200 most recent system log entries, and then list the top 5 event sources that appear the most often. So get event log, system log, new is 200, sort descending, and then first 5 event sources. All right, so here are our top 5 event sources and the count for each one, starting with the most, so 32 for DCOM, and then 23 for Microsoft Windows, whatever the rest of it is, 21 for Service Control Manager, and down the line. All right, so as you can see, there is quite a bit to it when it comes to analyzing the Windows event logs using PowerShell, and there are tons of commands you could use, many, many ways to tweak them, many ways to mess them up, as you saw as well. So it's definitely a trial and error type thing, but it's also definitely a good way to learn PowerShell, especially when you do start making mistakes and then you learn how to fix them. So I suggest playing around with it and see how it works for you. All right, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe.